Hi, everybody. This is our Slate Summit presentation recording for our presentation called Optimized and Accessible, Mastering Email Deliverability and Mobile-Friendly Design. My name is Brett Bieber. I am a Slate Communications strategist at Carnegie. My persona is the clever and confident producer. I've been a Slate user since 2020, and I've been with Carnegie since November 2023. Unable to make it here today with us, but a crucial part of our presentation was Clinton Midkiff. He is the Director of Admissions, Communications, and Operations at Cleveland State. His persona is the innovative and inquisitive adventurer. He's been with Cleveland State since 2016, and he has been a Carnegie partner since 2020.
My name is Christine Riley. I'm also a Slate communication strategist. My archetype is the creative and caring shepherd. I have been in Slate since 2015, but I've been with Carnegie since August of 2023.
Hi, my name is Catherine Thomas. I'm also a Slate communication strategist. My archetype is the resilient and supportive confidant. I have been a Slate user since 2021 and just joined the Carnegie team in May of 2025 and previously had been a Carnegie partner with Louisiana Tech and had been there since 2017.
All right, so we'll get started right away. We have quite a few goals with our presentation. First being, we're going to break down deliverability, give a few different definitions for it before we move into reporting and measuring success, and then moving over to setting best practices, as well as some additional reporting tactics, different conditional logic that you can use, source code vocabulary, and then finally changing code for your mobile accessibility. So with that said, let's break down deliverability. So email deliverability refers to the ability of the email to successfully reach the recipient's inbox. Strong deliverability ensures that your messages avoid the spam folders and are seen by the intended audiences. And these are influenced by factors like sender reputation, email content, authentication protocols like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, and then as well how your recipients are actually interacting with your emails. So before we go any further, I do want to break down what SPF, DKIM, and DMARC actually are. These are unique identifiers that tie your Slate instance to your website. Now, when you're using Slate to send emails on behalf of your website's domain, these three records ensure trust and deliverability. So SPF says, yes, the CRM, which is Slate, is allowed to send for us. DKIM proves that Slate really sent the message and that it's been untampered with. And then DMARC enforces the rules to either reject or quarantine imposters and will send visibility reports. So both IP addresses and web domains are given sender reputation scores. Your domain can be found in your DKIM configuration page module within your specific Slate instance. Now, the IP address reputation of your Slate instance lies solely in Technolution's hands, while your domain reputation is dictated not only by the emails you send via Slate, but any other emails sent via your school's domain address. Now, typically, these Technolution's IP addresses come right out of the box in the upper 90th percentile, with sender score reputations hovering in that 80 or 98 to 99 percentile. While, as we can see from the image below, the rest of our industry-wide sender reputations are closer to that 70 to 80% range. And then you can look up your sender reputation using free online tools at any time. SenderScore or Google Postmaster are both available and they're both free. So what are some tools within Slate that we can actually use to start measuring our deliverability? Well, there's a brand new feature called Deliver Insights, and it provides these high-level and large-scale communication reporting tools. So Deliver Insights provides database-wide insights into spam reports down to the month, as well as different trends of when other universities and colleges are sending the most communications and their corresponding deliverability. And I really use this in particular to measure different trends in sender spikes or sender declines across all universities and seeing if there's maybe an area where we could pick up, or maybe we're sending too much compared to the rest and we need to slow down. But I use Deliver Insights really to try and look at high-level emerging trends or valuable untapped opportunities that could be available. So some things that we can start doing right away today to improve our email deliverability, because it's not just SPF, DKIM, or DMARC. We need to clean our recipient lists regularly. This means cycle prep, right? As right now is the perfect time of year. At the time of this recording, it's early July. This is when we're going through our population rules, removing the old terms, adding the new terms, doing our appropriate retroactive refreshes. We want to make sure that we warm up our domain and IP together. In particular, if you have a brand new instance, you want to start small and then over a few weeks, gradually increase your sends to build your reputation. You want to send consistently, so avoid any sudden spikes. If you're sending 5,000 emails a week, 4 weeks on a row, and then 1 week you jump from 5,000 to 1,000,000, right? This is going to start to flag these email carriers. So we want to have regular, predictable email behavior, and that'll help build that good sender reputation. We want to try different A/B tests, try different subject lines, send times, colors, where a button is, CTAs. These are all really quick, easy wins that we can use to improve engagement, which is really that organic deliverability enhancement. We want to suppress our unengaged contacts, specifically looking at our transfer and graduate campaigns. We really want to focus on the students who have engaged previously in a different campaign or have had other kinds of different campus activity. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we utilize our message groups. Message groups empower students by providing them the opportunity to opt out of certain communication flows without opting out of all of their communications. So I just brought up warming up your IP address and your domain together. So I have this slide here specifically looking at that domain warming process. So when we're setting up our domain warming, this usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the size of your list and the size of your instance. And I typically start with really small sends, maybe 500 to 1,000 people with the first send, maybe 1,000 to 1,500 people with the second send, and then we gradually grow and we grow and we grow. And what we want to do is we want to target the audiences with the most reliable historical engagement rates. That means if it's the time of year where you have your deposits, we want to email your deposits and then move backwards with your yield and then move backwards with your students that have started an application, so on and so forth. We want to talk to them with very high engaging CTAs, whether it's an apply CTA, visit, inquire, take next steps. We want students to be compelled to actually engage with the email. Now, of course, I can hear, well, Brett, I've already bought my list of students. I have 200,000 students. What do you mean I have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to start emailing them? Well, not necessarily. We can still make a lot of progress with our actual admissions process along this way of IP warming. So I do have 2 clients, both of their names were redacted, but for my first client, 63% of all of their applications created that cycle were from students who specifically engaged with the IP warning emails. We only sent to their inquiries and to their local prospects. And then with a second client, 26% of all of their applications created throughout the entire cycle were created from prospects that we talked to during that IP warming and pushing those prospects to apply. Now, over the course of the 2 to 3 weeks, when we're warming up our domain and IP address together, not only are we having smaller sends, but we also like to have certain click goals. So of course, this is wildly dependent on the actual list that you're sending to. But for the first 3 to 4 emails, I like to see at least a 1% click rate. And with those final 3 to 4 emails, I like to see about a 0.5% click rate. And if I can hit these goals, I consider my IP warming a success. Okay, Brett, that's great. We have deliverability, we have exactly the definition that we have some different tools, both inside and outside of Slate. So now when we look at the rest of our campaigns, how can we start measuring success and know that our deliverability is working? So before you actually send anything, you need to decide what success is. Is it a certain amount of click counts or unique clicks? Is it form submissions? Is it actual conversions? Total engagement? Is it a specific CTA's engagement? If you want something to be successful, you have to define what that success actually looks like before you start the action, and then you know how to measure it. Without any kind of clear metrics, it's impossible to know what's working, what's not, or how to improve for the next time. And this goes not only just for email campaigns, but general recruitment strategy, launching new initiatives. Setting these measurable goals is the first step towards meaningful results. And of course, you can't optimize what you don't track. And that's really what we're starting to break apart here. Okay, Brett, that's great. I want to measure success, but how do I measure success? Well, we're going to go through some short-term, long-term, and very long-term different reporting tactics. Something that we can start doing right away is we can start using our tracking report and delivery report that we see within each and every one of our message mailings. So these tracking reports and delivery reports are quick queries that live within every single message mailing after the message launches. It's directly underneath the actual graphic visual that you see of those different spikes of opens and clicks. Now, the tracking report gives you one row per action taken for each message sent. So if there's an open, there's a row. If there's a click, there's a row. And every single time there's a click, there's a brand new row. And associated with that row is the timestamp, as well as different insights into the browsers that the students were using. Now, the delivery report gives you one row per message sent in total. So this will count the total number of times that the message was clicked rather than one row per click. As well, it'll provide different timestamps for the delivered date and the last updated date, which would be your action taken. And then the delivery report is also fantastic for providing insights into why the message itself bounced. A few similarities between your tracking report and your delivery report. Both show the actual recipient of the email, both provide the message grid, and both can easily join to the message mailing base. Speaking of the message mailing base, I'm often using quick queries within the message mailing base to give me excellent big picture insights. So we can very quickly see how many mailings belong to a specific folder or subfolder, how many mailings were sent over the last cycle, 2 cycles ago, or our current cycle. We can export out different UTM information. We can filter on different UTM information, as well gain great insights into delivery-based metrics such as click count or skip count for a total mailing. And one thing I'm also doing quite often is I'm using the message mailing base to find out how many mailings exist within a specific folder itself. Okay, so we start with our queries, and now we want to grow and start implementing some longer term reporting. And so I want to move from the query module over to the report module. So as a very first choice for building out my communications reports, I'm going to start in the report module, and we're typically going to contain 2 report parts. So the first report part is going to be on the message base, which takes up the majority of our message mailing report. And then right below that, I like to have a person base part as well. So when building out our report, we want to place subquery folder filters on the top level, as well as column and rows to help speed up our processing time because we're on that large message table. And when we're finding out our different click ratios or open ratios, we want to make sure that we assign variable names that'll need to be assigned to the clicks, opens, and total counts so that each additional column can have a formula created with it. And then if we want to go even further, right, you now have years and years and years of messages. Your message table is absolutely huge, and we start to see that these reports slow down. It's at this point where we took it one step further and started using these materialized view queries that we heard about at this year's summit to really build out and replicate the report module within a portal itself. So I just want to take a few seconds and just really go through exactly what our campaign dashboard portal looks like. Okay, perfect. So we have our deliverability. We have our definitions of deliverability. We know what success is. We know how to report on it. Now we can finally start sending some emails, is what I would say if you had a comp plan, right? But the first thing before we can send any kind of emails, we have to create that comp plan. And that means we have to write it down, right? We have to create strategic send cadences. And we use these as the key to boosting engagement and driving conversions. And this means that rather than overwhelming prospects with frequent messages or losing momentum with sporadic outreach, writing it down and creating a well-planned cadence ensures that emails are timed to align with the student journey, whether they're at the prospect stage, the application stage, or maybe they've already deposited. Making sure that we have a written down communication plan is the first key to success. By mapping communications to these different enrollment milestones, and then we have the opportunity to segment by geographic, demographic, or any kind of behavioral insights, admissions teams, marketing teams, communication teams can then deliver the right message at the right time, increasing form submissions, clicks, yield, and other types of conversion. Now, when do we do all of this work? Cycle prep. Cycle prep, cycle prep, cycle prep. Success is defined in cycle prep. Timelines are defined in cycle prep. And cycle prep has to be intentional and it has to be devoted. Cycle prep is not a day. Cycle prep's probably not a week. It takes a long time to go through and see what's worked in the past, look at your data, compare that data, find different insights, and then start to implement them. And what it does is cycle prep takes this reactive messaging and turns it into strategic storytelling because you already have anticipated these key moments like program launches, seasonal trends, university updates. All of these fall under that cycle prep, and it allows your teams to align the messaging, the content plan, and coordinate channels in advance for these communications. It provides insight and foresight, not only reducing last minute scrambles, but also ensuring consistency, impact, and agility in responding to these different evolving narratives. And then as well, this is the time when these metrics can be determined to encapsulate what a successful campaign is. What do we want to see from our entirety of our senior search campaign, our action campaign, so on and so forth. Okay, it's 10 p.m. It's the last window. Do you know where your emails are? It's a powerful question. Do you know how many emails your students receive each week? How does this differentiate depending on where they are in their enrollment journey? Purposefully designing campaign start dates, end dates, message frequency, and time of the sends themselves are all key factors that play into the communication campaign and its long-term deliverability. I highly recommend building out a small report that checks the average number of emails a student receives if they don't move along their enrollment journey and see if that matches your expectations. I have a screenshot below where we found out that if a student was at the prospect stage and they've been a prospect for the entire cycle, they receive about 19 and a half messages at that point. Now, if a student raises their hand, they say, I would like more information, I'm excited to learn more, we actually found out that these students receive almost 50% less emails than if they were still a prospect. And then if they took one step further, they jumped from 13 emails over the course of the cycle to almost 50. Now, if this is what you're intending to do, then that's fine. But by having the report and the data to back it up, you can make these data-informed decisions. Now, still on the actual send cadences themselves, we have to purposefully develop standards and a reputation, both internally and externally, for when different types of messages are going to go out throughout the day. We develop different strategies that work around your team and your communication plans to meet your goals. And so one scenario, just an idea, is to have all academic ad hocs. Maybe they're coming from your faculty, right? Use that 10 a.m. to noon window. If you have different events, open houses, visit pushes, use the noon to 2 time window. And then all of your admissions-based emails could be used from the 2 to 4 time window. Now, of course, as your instance grows and grows and grows and your queries become larger, you may need to select 2 delivery windows to make sure that the query runs on time. But that's something that you have to evolve and move towards. And so as a first choice, if you can get everything in within 1 delivery window, I do recommend it. And then lastly, we have our message groups. So as stated right at the beginning of our presentation, message recipients feel empowered when they have the control over the different types of communications that they receive. And they're also less likely to just blanket unsubscribe from all the communications when given a choice. Now, when you create message groups in Slate, your unsubscribe page is updated to include those groups as options from which each recipient can unsubscribe. Now, the only message groups that show up on the unsubscribe page are those that the recipient has received within the last 90 days. They're quick, they're easy, and they're a powerful implementation tool to increase your deliverability and make sure that your students stay within your comm flows. Okay, so we've described deliverability, we've described success, we've built out our communication plan, we're looking at our email, and I'm ready to personalize it. How do I customize my emails? With conditional logic. Conditional logic allows you to both show and or hide different text, paragraphs, or images based on each user's data. So there's two primary methods to do this. It's with either simple conditions using the if button in Deliver, or you could use liquid markup, which is an expansive language backed by Shopify that includes custom complex conditional written code in your source. Liquid markup is a flexible scripting language, again, built off of Shopify for building conditional content. So a few key tools of that liquid markup. We have our if statements, our else if statements, or our else statements. And these are our standard and typical conditional tags. But you also have the case statement, which provides cleaner multiple choice comparisons. We have the assign, capture, our for our for loops and liquid looping, and our unless statements. And these create these powerful loops and assignments that allow us to go through and see every single material that a student might be missing. We also have comparison operators equal to, not equal to, greater than, or less than or equal to in contains. And we also have our Boolean operators, our and or our or. And again, all of this is actually written within the source code of the email itself. Now, I did mention a little bit earlier, one of my favorite pieces of liquid markup to use is the for loop. These loops let you process different arrays of information, whether it's a checklist, it's an event, it's an award, and you build the array using the dictionary subquery export within your query editor. And again, a few different examples. If you want to list all campus events a student signed up for, you want to use a for loop. If you want to show all the scholarships a student has been awarded, you want to use a for loop. If you want to display completed or uncompleted checklist items and the dates that they were fulfilled, we'll use a for loop. We also want to break down the difference between content blocks and translation codes. Content blocks are reusable chunks of HTML text-based on the user data. And these are grouped by different keys, matched to values, whether it's the major, the GPA, it could be the student interest. And within the message itself, it displays via a merge field below. And a few different use cases. One example could be if it's a major specific messaging, or a second example could be whether it's an admissions counselor or a staff assigned signature. So again, these are really chunks of HTML. The translation codes are much smaller. These will change the field values before displaying or exporting. And this might just be moving what a major is coded in as and maybe elongating or shortening its actual value. And the same can be said with different scholarship values. Okay, so how do we create these content blocks? Well, we'll break it down step by step. First, we have our key. We want to use a computer-friendly name, such as interest. We do not want to use spaces and no special characters. This is what we're actually going to call upon. We want to make sure that we have a strong folder structure. So it could be academic interest, it could be events, it could be the GPA. We want to make sure that everything is housed very nice together. We want to select our different types. Typically, this is a string, but you do have the option to make it a string, integer, real date, or date time. You always want to make sure that you use the default snippet. So if we are calling upon the key, but there's no information to fit the key, the student will receive the default snippet. This is your default content block. Of course, we have our save button. We can come back and edit later to update any kind of settings or HTML, at which point we can now click new code and we can enter our value, whether it's a certain GPA, whether it's a certain academic interest. In this example, we're using biology. And then for the snippet itself, we do have the full WYSIWYG editor to create the content, or we can use the source code. And then after we've created the type, the key, exactly how this content block is going to live, we can then press save. A few different key uses for these content blocks. You can use them within Deliver, but you can also use them within portals, form messages, or snippets themselves. Now, with that said, there's a few places where you can't use your content blocks. That'll be your actual Deliver message mailing subject lines, form questions or their associated answers, portal filters, or query exports. And we do have a very neat example between this slide and the next. So on the right-hand side here, we're actually looking at the inside of a Deliver message. So it would read, hi, person preferred, and then right there, we are pulling in program-specific information from a content block. Now, if we go to the next slide, we can actually see that this is populating based off of that content block itself. Now, moving over and focusing more so on these different translation codes. When we're creating our translation codes, we want to move from our database module over to the translation code module, at which point we click the new key. And again, we want to give it a lowercase name, no spaces, no special characters. We have the same value types as before. So again, usually this is a string, but we have the option for a string, integer, real number, date, or date time. Translation codes can hold up to 5 different export values, at which point we can click the new code to start adding these different translations. The value itself will be the raw data that you'll use to match the translation code with the export to access these different export values. Now, these export values are going to be how the values actually translated, but there are different options to use minimum or maximum if we're using numbers or date ranges as well. And then finally, always make sure to save whenever you're editing either content blocks or translation codes. A quick pro tip, if you're using the translation code import source format, which is found in the source format library, you can download the template Excel file, fill out any of the required columns that you're looking for, whether it's key, type, min, max, value, exports 1 through 5, and you can upload this file via upload dataset, and you'll create a large batch of brand new translation codes. So a really neat example of translation codes here. So we're going to take the example of a DART, which is the psychographic that we use here at Carnegie. And so one student meets the criteria of carefree adventures. That's their psychographic analysis. And we're going to take this, match it to the key value, and the export value will say, welcome to the home of adventure. And so you can plug this into different deliver messages, all while keeping one value that has multiples of different export values that we can then call upon within different deliver messages. Another use case, if there's a group email where the send times are reporting on different deliverability and engagement rates. So we can set that different minimum or maximum time period and then export out an elongated or different time period with a little bit of extra content. Okay, so now let's compare content blocks and translation codes. So we want to use content blocks when it's reusable HTML or a big chunk of content, right? If we're showing a dynamic blurb, if it's an image, if it's a layout, if it's a large piece. If it's audience specific, we can put in different content based on major, program, or event types. If it's centralized, right? We want to update one piece of content and it'll move across all emails, forms, and portals that are live. And if it's visible to the user. So this will show up in the body of different deliver emails, forms, or the portal content itself. It's excellent for different welcome messages, event schedules, counselor signatures, and major specific callouts. Now, one quick tip, because I know that we just went over a lot between translation codes and conditional logic and content blocks should not be used within export fields or subject lines. Now, because we're comparing the content blocks to the translation codes, we will want to use these translation codes when we're remapping data. So using it to convert one value to another, whether it's ENG over to the College of Liberal Arts or the College of Liberal Arts over to ENG, depending on how your forms and prompts are set up. They're great for behind the scenes logic. They work in exports, calculations, form logic, and it's not typically visible. Groups or simplifying the actual values themselves. So translating GPA ranges, residency codes, or term codes into labels. We can use it for export-ready formats, such as formatting data from a different SIS, CRM, or report without having to write any type of custom logic. And again, we can actually see these examples on the right-hand side, using your GPA value, running it through a translation code to get different rating tiers, moving different dates within a certain range over to a season. A specific major can now belong to a specific college, application codes over to readable names. And finally, one great piece about translation codes is that they can hold up to 5 different export values. So it's perfect for a multitude of different situations without having to create brand new fields, prompts, or even brand new translation codes.
So once you've made sure that your emails get delivered to your students' inboxes and are customized for all the different conditions that you might have within your mailings, one of the last pieces is to make sure that your emails look great and to make sure that particularly they look great on your students' mobile devices. But what exactly is mobile friendly design? What is optimizing for mobile friendliness? Well, it's constructing a mailing with the end user in mind, and particularly optimizing all design elements for smaller screens. And this is something that we're really all experts in, right? We all have gotten an email where we've had to maybe scroll left or right in order to read the entirety of the mailing, or you have to zoom in or zoom out because the font size is just way too tiny for our mobile devices. And so this is something we all know. So just a few statistics to really hone in on why this is so important and why mobile optimization is so vital in your deliver strategy. We know that Gen Z is on their phones, right? But 67% will raise their hand and say that their primary method of checking their email is on their phones. So think about that. If your mailings are not optimized for mobile use, two-thirds are going to see a mailing that might not just look right on their screens. Additionally, 15% of mailings that are designed for mobile friendliness have a higher click rate than those that are not optimized for mobile friendliness. And that really is the end goal, right? We've worked so hard in order to get our mailings delivered, customized, and so we want to make sure that we get that highly important click. And then I think what is maybe one of the most just astounding, and probably honestly, we can all say we've done this before. 75% of Americans would just say they would delete an email that's not optimized for mobile. And again, we have worked so hard to get to this moment of actually, of our students actually opening and clicking on the mailings that we've worked so hard to get. And so just an automatic delete is just not what we want. And so what do we do about it? So in Deliver now, let's kind of go back to just the Slate side of things. How do we deliver in Deliver? So we go to the WYSIWYG editor, right? This is the basic email design creator that is inherent within your Slate instance. It allows for a lot of things: table design, conditional logic, basic test formatting, link creation, all those things. But it has some pretty significant limitations. And if you've worked in the WYSIWYG editor, you're most likely really familiar with them. There's nowhere to add media queries, which Christine will kind of elaborate on what those are. And then there's also limited styling options. And so, kind of what do we do with that? It's, with the WYSIWYG editor as it is at face value, there's not as many ways that we really can work to optimize our emails for mobile friendliness. So we have to go into the source code. So when you look at the source code, I think a lot of emotions might come into play, and you are not the only one. There could be just some kind of just general hesitancy of I'm not good at code. That's not what I was maybe in communications or a marketing major. Code isn't my background. And I think that's something that, especially coming to Summit and seeing some other presentations, a lot of us feel, and a lot of us have been there. And so going into the source code does not mean you have to be a coding extraordinaire. You just have to have a few little bits of knowledge within HTML and CSS within your knowledge base in order to really optimize your mailings. And a little bit really does go a long way. So we're going to share just a few tips in order to optimize those emails.
I could not agree more. 2 years ago, I had never opened the source code in an email, and now it's one of my favorite places to go and tinker around. So if I can do it, I promise you can too. But to break it down, what is the source code? The source code is all of the behind the scenes markup in language that controls how your email looks and behaves. Thankfully, it's color coded for all of you type A personalities. So the HTML will be basically anything in green on this right-hand side here. It will structure the content with headings, images, buttons, tables, etc. Inline CSS, which is what will be in the blue and the red, to style it, like fonts, colors, and spacing. If the HTML is like the bones of your email, the CSS is the skin of your email. And of course, emails are just tables on tables on tables. So all of these tags in here as well can help ensure consistent layout across email clients to create polished and visually branded messages for no matter the audience, whether they're using Gmail or our worst enemy, Outlook. And finally, tags to specify content, links, and lists. Tags you might not be familiar with. So here are some HTML tags to know to help you understand what you're looking at when you open the source code. So the head tag will contain all of the meta info, like the styling that's applied to your entire email. So don't worry, none of that is visible to your students that receive the email. The body is what holds all of that visible content. Headers will be labeled as H1 through H6. Paragraphs will be marked with this ~P. Images will look like IMG. And then tables are made up of 3 fields called table, TR, and TD. So table begins the table, TR is the table row, and TD is the data cell. But what about this? That doesn't look like any of them, and it's at the top of your email, and you've seen it, and it's probably scary. This is the media query, and unfortunately, it's not linked to the query module at all. So this is your secret weapon when it comes to mobile accessibility. The media query helps dictate specific instructions based on the size of the screen. You can see at the very top here, it says at media only, screen, and max width 600 pixels. Basically, what that's saying is everything that's within this big chunk of paragraph, I want these rules to apply when the screen width is 600 pixels or less. And then everything after that is the instructions. Each green tag will contain style information after it, or it will appear as a gray period class name, where you can define class names in the specific tags, which we'll get to in just a second, that helps style and impact only in mobile. So we're going to give it a try. I've got 3 examples for you all. The first things first is changing text styles. So sometimes our email templates, the font looks great on desktop and it's left aligned, but in mobile, I might want it to be center aligned. So we're going to change that. If you're using tools like Stripo to create your email templates, or your marketing department has just given you an email template to upload into Slate, you probably already have a media query within your source code. So it's just about identifying where the code already exists and changing it to be how we want it to. So it might look like this up top in the gray box. H1 font size inherit important, text align left. H1 is applying the styling just to header 1 text, and font size inherit keeps the text the same size as it does in desktop. It's saying, hey, whatever is written in the rest of the email, just keep it that way. Font size 24, if we change it, will define the new font size in mobile. Text align left can shift that text to hug the left side, and we can change it to text align center to do exactly that, center the text. And you'll see this a lot in your media query, this blue exclamation mark important. That's just telling the system, override anything that the later on inline CSS is saying. This is most important rule to follow. So in the end, something like this can turn to this. But what about things that aren't already existing in the media query? Say I have this beautiful email with a student quote, and I have a picture of them on the left and the quote on the right. But when it's in mobile, it's the image, and then we've got like 2 words per line. We don't want that. So we can add a class of float change to our image tag and add this code on the right in the gray box to our media query. We're defining the class name with this period float change so that each class equals float change is selected. Our width of 100% forces the image to take up the full width of the container it's in, so it won't expand any further than the boundaries of your email. Height of auto keeps the image proportional by scaling the height in accordance with the new width. Margin of 10 pixels auto adds 10 pixels of space around the image to help center it horizontally. And float of none removes the left float that might have originally been applied to the image to help the image appear left on desktop. And again, that exclamation mark important overrides all of the original formatting so that this can look like this in mobile. And finally, we have stacking buttons. So something really important to think about when we're designing emails for mobile devices is the size of your thumbs. So screens are getting bigger and bigger, and my thumbs are not that long. So if I'm trying to hit a button, I might click the one that's right next to it instead. So we can combat this by stacking buttons. So what we'll do is we'll add class equals stack in each TD section that you want to stack in mobile and add the code in the gray box to our media query. The dot stack display block important width 100%, max width 100%. So again, dot stack selects each class equals stack in your code and the rest of your email. Display of block forces each cell to behave like a block element, which just means it's going to be on top of each other rather than side by side. Width of 100% makes each column take up the full width that's allowed. It won't break outside the bounds of your emails. And similarly, that max width ensures that no max width is restricting the layout on mobile. And again, that exclamation mark important overrides the original code so that this turns into this.
So once you've made those adjustments within your source code, it is so important. And like Brett said earlier, with cycle prep to test, test, test. Not all email clients render the same. And like Christine alluded to earlier, mainly Outlook. So it's important to test across various platforms to ensure that your deliverability is standardized across all students are viewing what you want them to be viewing. So within Slate, there is the option to do this manually. So you can just send test messages. It's important to think about different considerations, such as Android versus Apple or iOS. Also dark mode versus light mode. So if you have, maybe you could huddle a bunch of coworkers within an office and see who might have different variability within their phones and send a bunch of test emails to make sure that your mailing is rendering how you want it to. If you want to use some paid testing services, you can check out Email on Acid or Litmus. Both of these have a 7-day free trial. So if you just want to test it out and see if it might be something that's worth the investment, that's something you could do. But again, it is an inherent feature within Slate as well that you can have for free. So here's some resources, some knowledge base articles about what we discussed today, about deliverability, about mobile accessibility. We also wanted to mention ChatGPT can be a helpful resource just to troubleshoot your code if it's not working maybe the way that you want it to. And then also just the Slate AI feature that was announced at Summit as well is going to be such a helpful tool within this area. We also have the Carnegie Campaign demo series that we've linked here too for you to check out just some other helpful resources within the realm of Deliver. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.